episode of the Project Egg Show. I'm your host, Ben Gothard, and today we have the honor of speaking with Dr. Paul Zak. How you doing today, Dr. Paul?
Hey, Ben.
Howdy, howdy. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. I know you have a ton of things on your plate, doing a lot of amazing things. So I want to dive into that, but I appreciate you coming on the show, taking out the time to do so, because I really wanted to ask you, what is your story?
Such a deep question. My story is I'm a Martian, so I don't really understand the humans. And so in my academic laboratory at Claremont Graduate University, I started running experiments to try to figure out why humans are doing what they're doing. And through that work, um, was the first scientist to develop a technology to measure the brain's acute production of this chemical oxytocin that we subsequently showed is an important signal in telling us why we interact with strangers, why we trust people, how we facilitate relationships. And then the second answer to that is I'm a tool guy, so then I build tools. And so I then build tools so we can measure these and iterate these technologies. So I still think I'm a Martian. I don't think I still understand the humans that well, but at least I have tools to help me do it.
So when did you first discover that you were a Martian and that you really wanted to learn more about the people and the human race?
There's a story there which I'll share with you. So I always had jobs. So I kind of grew up lower middle class, and when I was 18, I worked at a Arco gas station in Santa Barbara, California, right on the side of the freeway. And you work at a gas station on the side of the freeway for a year, you see everything. You see the alcoholics, the drug users, the prostitutes, the gangbangers. It's a real life experience. But anyway, one Sunday I was there by myself, and this dude comes in, and he had a beautiful jewelry case. They said, "Hey, I was just in the men's room, and I found this jewelry case with this pearl necklace in it. And did someone lose this? I mean, I don't know. It's obviously important." And I said, "Well, I'll put it in lost and found." And he goes, "You better not put it in lost and found because, you know, this is a really nice jewelry case. Like this thing's got to be worth a ton of money, and we got to find the owner." What do I know? I'm 18. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess so. I'll secure it somewhere." And then lo and behold, the phone rings. And the dude calls up and goes, "Oh man, I was at your gas station a while ago, and I bought this necklace for my wife, and I don't know. Did anybody turn something in? I don't even know where it is. I'm freaking out." And I said, "Yeah, guy just turned it in. It's great." So I tell the guy standing next to me, "Hey, the dude who lost it's here, and he's going to offer a $200 reward, and just hang tight." And the guy goes, "Oh man, I can't stay. I got this job interview. I got to be there in 20 minutes, and man, is there some way that we could kind of figure out how to get this jewelry back to this dude, get the reward?" And you could see it coming, but I couldn't because I was 18. And he's like, "Well, why don't we split the reward?" I'm like, "Oh no, 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 no. I don't care. Like you earned it, man. It's yours." "No, no, no. I gotta go. You give me $100, and the guy comes and gives you 200. We're all good." So it's a classic con called the pigeon drop. Of course, the pearl necklace was paste, and so I grew up in a nice little neighborhood, and I didn't know any criminals, and so all of a sudden you think, oh, now these humans are doing something very different, right? This is
Mhm.
a different way of manipulating the kind of social interactions that we expect. That's kind of weird. So when I went to college, I'm like, I got to figure out some way to kind of build tools to really understand the humans you're doing, because obviously I'm a doofus or a Martian.
Well, it seems like, I mean, it seems like it was a lot based on trust, that whole interaction and manipulating trust that's just inherent. I mean, in a lot of human beings. So I'm curious though, how did that lead specifically to your work with oxytocin?
Yeah, so another good question. So yeah, so now I've sort of become an expert on trust, um, but um, the leverage point of that con in most cons is not that the con man got me to trust him. He showed he trusted me. Hey, what do you think we should do? How do we get this valuable necklace back to their person? I'm 18. I don't know shit, right? So it's like, how do you do that? And so that's what was interesting to me. So I had done work. So my PhD is in economics, but undergraduate biology and postgraduate neuroscience. So I helped start this field called neuroeconomics. And in neuroeconomics, we measure brain activity while people make decisions to understand why they're doing what they're doing, because they generally can't tell us. And so some of my previous work, sort of on biology and economics, looked at why countries are poor, which is kind of an ongoing question, and discovered that trust is one of these really powerful factors that tells us whether countries are going to be rich or poor. So rich countries are always high trust countries. The Nordic countries, the US is on the low end of that scale, but we modulate this in different ways. So where does trust come from? How does it affect economic transactions? And then Ben, this work had a lot of impact. Thousands of citations by other scholars, and the World Bank flies me out. How do we, build trust in these developing countries to raise incomes? And inevitably, I would get this question, because this research was on why countries are different and what the kind of underlying institutions, political institutions, legal institutions, social structures affect trust. Someone would ask me in a seminar, well, gosh, for a given country, why do two strangers ever trust each other? And I would just, go, well, blah, 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 blah. And inside your head, you go, like the imposter syndrome, right? You go, you are so full of crap, how can you be a trust expert and not know the most basic questions? Like, why do I trust you, Ben, right now? And, your producer, Bob, I'm making this up, sketchy dude. Like, what is, how do we make that decision? How do we live in big cities? How do humans, unlike almost every other animal, like to be around strangers? Think of an airplane. You put 300 humans on a plane for 5 hours, shake them up. No one gets killed, right? You put chimpanzees in that little space and fur and blood's flying in a couple of minutes. So we're very, very unique. So it led me to looking for the underlying neurologic mechanism through which I could say, Ben safe, Bob not, right? At a very minimum, that's what evolution apparently has given us. So what's the underlying mechanism? Because I'm a tool guy. Once I find that mechanism, I can build a tool to measure it.
So I want to take a step back for a second, because you covered a lot of stuff here that I think is really important. I believe I heard you say that trust is an indicator of the economic prosperity of a region. And I've read some of your work, and I was fascinated by it. It's one of the reasons why I was so excited to speak with you today. But I believe I read that trust is one of the social or economic lubricants that allows transactions to happen. Because if I trust that the other person, if I have trust with the other person, then I'm more likely to be able to do business with them, which allows us to exchange goods and fuel the economy and allow it to grow and prosper. Is that really what you meant by trust being an indicator, or like why specifically? Why is trust actually such a reliable indicator of economic success within a region?
Key question. Trust, this term of art in statistics called a sufficient statistic. It's like one measure that tells you about the entire population. So trust is kind of a sufficient statistic for a well-functioning society. So let's take the logical extreme. Let's suppose there's a society with zero trust. So if I want to do a deal with you, I've got to have 3 lawyers, I've got to have a policeman. So economists call these transaction costs. So now the transaction cost of doing that work is really high. So less of that work's going to get done, right? Higher cost means less gets done. So now translate that on the other extreme to say Denmark, where I spent a lot of time. So in Denmark, there's 5 million people. There's like 4 last names. They're all related to each other. So it's really easy to get work done because my cousin and I know your sister, and it's very costly to take advantage of people who that you're socially connected to. So countries that are more heterogeneous, like the U.S., tend to have lower trust just because we have fewer shared touch points. As I said earlier, what we did was characterize why trust would vary across countries, and it's a function of whether that country's political legal sector works effectively, whether the social sector works effectively. Do people get together? Do they meet each other? Is there free media? And then this kind of underlying kind of economic factor. So inequality tends to reduce trust. So things like different languages tend to reduce trust. So again, Denmark's easy example. Single language, they all look the same. They're all related to each other genetically. Not hard to think. Or Iceland, or just go through the list. So I think what's more interesting is how did the U.S., how did Mexico, how do you actually take these heterogeneous countries and still have enough trust where economies will grow? What we showed is that actually if trust gets below a certain level, around 25% of people say, yes, I trust other people. Below that, you actually get no economic growth at all. So there's just too much friction. So then fast forward into one-on-one relationships, there's normal friction. Like, how do we go to work and not murder people? I mean, it's a funny thing to think about, but again, most other animals would do that. You have resources. I want resources. Why do I not just kill you? So murder among humans happens, but actually it's pretty rare. And it's becoming more rare the more our prosperity goes up. So it seems like such a basic question. And then that leads to the next question, which is, why are we good most of the time? Why do we behave in an ethical or moral way, even when no one's looking? How the hell can that happen? And that was a topic of my first book, The Moral Molecule.
So it seems like the pain of doing a transaction versus the pain of not doing a transaction is really at the core of this idea of trust. And the more trust there is, the less painful it is to do it. The less trust there is, the more painful it is to do it. And so just based on, okay, well, it's just more difficult to get things done, less things are actually going to get done.
Right. I think how many business deals you've been in and I've been in where you go, look, we're going to do this deal. The lawyer said, we're going to work on it. We're going to do it. Right. So that's trust. Right. So, people are going to start preparing and all that. It happens all the time because I can read you. Right. As social creatures, we're acutely aware, and oxytocin is part of that system that tells me if I want to be around this dude or this person. Right. So if we don't have that, then we're really in trouble. So, for example, we studied a woman who has a very rare genetic disorder in which the areas that identify whether someone is safe or fearful are damaged, and so she basically can't judge, super scary looking guy with a hoodie and a knife as the normal dude walking down the street looking happy. They're all the same to her. She doesn't get that fear response, and so she gets taken advantage of a lot, which is unfortunate. So we're constantly balancing this desire to interact with strangers because cool things could happen. We could do a project, you could date a cute guy or girl or whatever we're trying to do with those other people versus, oh my God, that's a person I don't know. Maybe they're dangerous. Maybe they're going to take advantage of me. So we're in this balancing scheme, and think of oxytocin as pushing on the pro-social. Let's engage. Let's organize. Let's interact.
So it seems like your work has really been focused on understanding trust and studying trust, seeing the results of that, which kind of led you to oxytocin, which led you to be more in the field of neuroscience and economics, and really bringing those two together to start this amazing, cool field of neuroeconomics, which I just think is magical and so very, very important in the world. So then at what point did you start building the tools? Because it seems like that's very like conceptual and idea focused and research focused. At what point did you start moving into building tools to and I guess what specifically are the tools that you're building trying to accomplish?
Yeah. So the original sort of oxytocin discovery was a function of a tool of oxytocin has a very short half-life. It's a fragile molecule. So how do I get the brain to make this and capture it before it disappears in a couple of minutes? And so that required developing a tool. Maybe it's too grand a word, but developing a technique to do that. And then once you have this technique or tool, you can ask a lot of questions. So we developed a technique to shoot synthetic oxytocin into human brains safely, and done that hundreds and hundreds of times. So we can actually look at the causal effects of oxytocin. And then there's another little story here. And then we started getting funding from the US military, who, as you can kind of imagine, is interested in persuasion. So it turns out, if you trust me, you're also willing to sort of follow me, or you'll at least listen to what I have to say and maybe be persuaded. So they had a program some years ago called Narrative Networks that was designed to identify neurologic signals that would tell me if I'm being persuasive. and we thought oxytocin might be one of those. And the idea was really noble, by the way. So, it's easy to take shots at the government or the military, but this was, if we train soldiers to be better communicators, we could reduce conflict. Instead of me going up to you in the field somewhere and putting a gun to your head, hey, where are the ISIS fighters? I could say, look, you're out here, you have a family, I have a family. I just want to get these guys out of your village and go home safely. And I think that's what you want too, right? That's a different kind of ballgame. So yeah, I want to work on that for a number of years, which I did. So what DARPA said was, the blood draw is awesome, gold standard, super clear, no super, data processing needed to understand if oxytocin went up 25%, and what that does behaviorally. So we know a lot about the neuroanatomy of oxytocin. So we image people's brains and their bodies, and we know where their receptors live. And so we started using wireless sensors, big, $50,000 medical machines with wireless sensors to measure the downstream impact of that. And that gives us data at millisecond frequency. So now, instead of just before and after, I have a huge, rich data source I can begin to mine. And then subsequently, once we did that work, besides being a Martian, I'm a cheap bastard. And so, when neuroscience is expensive. So when people knock on the door and say, hey, I'm from company X, and we heard you're some expert on trust and persuasion, and we'd like to make our messaging more effective. Here's some cash. Can you work on that for us? I'm like, oh yeah. So companies started bringing us really hard problems. I can give you some examples of that. And then the problem was that we had these $50,000 machines, 13 PhDs to run them. And Ben, you have met PhDs, they talk funny, they smell funny. You don't want them in your office. That's a bad idea. So we started automating all the signal processing. And once we did that, we realized, gosh, we don't even need these machines anymore. We can just hack the signal from a wearable, like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, and we can do all this processing in the cloud and let anybody measure essentially what your brain cares about. So again, with apologies to listeners, I have to use one bad word, but one of our clients recently said, this is the give a shit measure. So that's GASM. So essentially what we're measuring is, is this experience sufficiently valuable that your brain goes, this is important, stuff it in your brain, access it later, use it. That's a pretty cool tool, right?
So it seems like the research kind of created the need for you to develop the tools, which then allowed you to go deeper into the research because you could answer and ask more and better questions. And the thing that was so fascinating to me, what you just said, was that you, instead of being able to see like before and after, getting the play-by-play of like what happens at a millisecond level, that must have just revolutionized your research. I mean, how much impact did that truly have?
Yeah, a lot, because it allows us to identify when things go great, when things go south. So maybe give a concrete example. Here was a hard problem we worked on recently with a production company, moderately big production company that makes unscripted TV, reality TV shows. And the problem in that industry is that most of those shows are not very good. And so the price they sell them to the cable networks at is very low. And it takes years before they build an audience, and then you get paid what you put into it. So they have a pricing problem. So they said, could you predict top-rated reality TV shows from bottom-rated shows? I'm like, oh, that's a hard problem, actually, right? Because advertising, they show at different times, different channels. I mean, I don't know. So I said, I don't know. I have no idea. But why don't you send us a ton of content, and then we'll recruit a bunch of people, have them watch it, and measure the neurologic responses and see if we can predict that. All right, cool. So they sent us 25 shows. They are all half-hour shows, so 22 minutes of content. And then you start thinking about the experiment for this, and you think, okay, if you're going to watch 25 shows times 22 minutes, I can't do that math in my head, but that exceeds the bladder capacity of all humans, right? So I talked to this company. I'm like, what if we had people watch the first act of that show? So there's sort of a little mini narrative arc. And even that, you can't do 25 times 8 minutes, too long. So we had half the people watch 12 shows, half watch 13. We get data every second, so that generates over 500,000 data points. Wow. Right? So then we put this in a predictive model, and we could predict with 84% accuracy. And they gave us like 10 shows that are top rated and 15 shows that were dogs. And we could identify the top rated shows with 84% accuracy. If you add in, have you seen the show before, that goes to 88% accuracy. And these guys' heads just blew off. Now, here's the coolest part of it. Then we started thinking, why is it the first act? How little information can we get from your brain So we reran the analysis using the first minute of that show, and we can still get 80% accuracy on which are top rated shows. So these shows that are good really turn on your brain and we can see those signals. Is that cool? So that's maybe it's a trivial application of that technology, but for guys who are producing a lot of TV shows, they need to know this information. It fixes this pricing problem, hopefully, but also I don't want to watch a crappy show. You don't want to watch a crappy show. So let's get rid of crappy shows, right? I want to have the better shows. If you knew that before you aired it, how awesome would that be?
Well, I think the implications of that go far, far beyond the television shows that we like. I mean, if we're able to predict with 80% accuracy, and I realize not every situation is going to be the same, but if we can have that strong of a prediction machine of what our response is going to be to certain stimulus, I mean, that is huge. That is huge. I mean, like what my mind immediately goes to is like, okay, well, what about with education? What if like, how can that be applied to there to where the information that teachers are sharing with their students, how can that be optimized or tested beforehand to make sure it's the most optimal information that's being shared, or the curriculum be tested beforehand? So like it almost seems like we could use that to optimize like what we're then giving ourselves to make our like to improve ourselves and to improve the inputs that we use on ourselves.
So magic just happened, and the listeners don't understand this, that we did not coordinate before this. We emailed each other, but we didn't coordinate. We are having a mind meld. So we have a client. So we built a company around this technology, and we have a client in the K-12 education space that does exactly that. So the teachers can watch in real time. Are these kids immersed in this? So we coin this word immersion to note a state where you're attentive and you really care about the information. And that varies from 0 to 10. Are the kids immersed in this task? If not, switch them. Let's have them do something else. Got to put breaks in, of course. And in addition, we have a leaderboard. So as soon as that class is over, that teacher can see Bobby is the most immersed. He really, this information landed in his brain. And Susie, not so much. Give her a follow-up now. Don't wait 3 weeks for the test. Let's begin to optimize not only how I present material on average, but customize it to each learner. So I'll give you a quick, absolutely true anecdote. So we were doing pilots of this last year in a low-income school district in California, and we were just observing the teachers using our technology. And so we had this teacher who was on a break, and I said, tell me how you're using it, blah, 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 and to make sure it's really useful and we can tweak it and make it better. And she said, I teach this math class, this 5th grade math class, and 3 days in a row, this girl named Maria was my immersion champion. She was totally into the class. She loved it, but I never knew that because she was quiet. She didn't say anything. She said, so on the 3rd day after class, I approached Maria and I said, gosh, it seems like you really like this class. And she just lit up. She goes, oh, I love math so much. And she goes, oh, great. Can I call on you in class? And so all of a sudden, this little girl now becomes a class leader. She comes out of her shell because we got this neurologic data that's honestly hard to read if I'm just looking at your face, right? So again, maybe eventually a teacher would see that this Maria is getting A's and A's and A's, but now I can see now, right, when I can do something with it. So yeah, super exciting. One of our biggest clients is Accenture. Accenture produces $1 billion with a B of training per year, and they had no metric to determine, hey, as we tweak it, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? And so now we're getting this feedback right away. So yes, super exciting. That's a huge problem. Learning is hard.
Right.
So let's make it as efficient as possible. And communication, let's make that if I'm going to talk to that cute girl to try to have her go out with me, I'd like to at least know general principles. Like what should I say to her? How can I be effective as a communicator? Because I'm a Martian.
That's amazing. Well, hey, we need more Martians because I think the work that you're doing is so impactful and so important. I mean, to me, the ability to help other people advance and progress at a much faster or more effective level, which to me is like the end game of at least the educational application of some of your research and some of your work. I mean, that's amazing. And that can put the human race forward at an accelerated level. Like if we can, I think about this all the time with entrepreneurship, right? I think about what are our strengths and weaknesses, because I feel like so many people do not play to their strengths. They are working on their weaknesses, or they're using their weaknesses. And it seems like a lot of the reason for that is that there's no self-awareness. People don't know what they're really good at. So if somebody could like put on a headset, or use their Apple Watch and try a bunch of different things and be like, okay, they may not know, but the technology can tell them, hey, you're getting the most like your immersion score, or whatever the grading system is, it's firing at the highest level, and bam, bam, bam. Okay, well, that's a really good start. That could save people from a lifetime of unhappiness and a lifetime of like such unproductivity, where they could be seriously productive members of society.
Yeah, and I think we have this sort of Freudian hangover that we think if I just dig deep enough into your brain that the unconscious will become conscious. No, it's like asking your liver how it processed your lunch. So we need a technology to do that. So yeah, so we just launched actually in June this employee performance application where employees wear a sensor, either their own or ours. And then over the course of a month, we just build a database for you and your supervisor on what's your brain dig at work and what frustrates you. And so, at 3.5% unemployment, I want to have you focused on the stuff you dig. And for the stuff you don't like doing that frustrates you, either give me less of that or give me training for that. And we built in other metrics, psychological safety, which got very famous because of Google indicator of good team performance. We can measure psychological safety passively, physiologically. We measure grit, which also is kind of famous now for the ability to overcome difficult situations and keep going, which is an indicator of readiness for promotion. So, all of a sudden now here's the key. Sorry, what you said, Ben. Every day at the end of the day on your phone, that employee gets that information. So they're learning about their own strengths and weaknesses. So again, you can begin to guide your own career. So I'm just make us. This is not a plug for a business, but I'm a professor at Claremont Graduate University, and I overlapped for 10 years with Peter Drucker, the famous management guru. And Peter wrote in the 60s, if you're a knowledge worker, which today I think is everybody, you have to be your own CEO. Now, as you said, Ben, how can I be my own CEO if I don't know my own strengths and weaknesses?
Exactly. So we've talked a little bit about what you've worked on, and how you've really gotten to where you are today. I'm curious though, what and we talked about it a little bit, but I want to ask directly, what is your biggest focus today, and like where does your research and your work really focus today?
We're really focusing on scaling up our company so that we can make this technology widely available. So it's really the first software as a service neuroscience company. And scaling's hard. You know this, you've done it. And so, really kind of building those processes so that, so we're 2 years out. So it's my fourth company. Building processes so that we can take what we've done on the small scale, non-scalable, talking to each customer, building a sales team, having processes to deliver the content. And that's hard. It's really hard. So a friend of mine gave me this great quote that I'm sure you know, but he said that most companies that go from 10 employees to 100 die by drowning, not by starvation. And we realized when we started doing an analysis of like product market fit that we were doing so many things that took a huge amount of time that did not generate revenue or move us towards generating revenue. And so we really had to sort of sit down, and this is very similar to knowing your own strengths. Which team member should be doing what? How do we begin to scale as opposed to everybody's doing everything? And getting out of that 10-person business and up to the hundreds, it's so hard. It feels like a heroic endeavor. I mean, I know you've done it a bunch of times. So how'd you overcome that? How'd you overcome the doing everything specifically and then allowing everyone else to do it so you didn't have to be involved?
So where I can really speak from a place of experience is with the show. And there absolutely was a period where I was doing every single piece of it. And now today, and I'm so grateful for this. But really, I show up and we get to have a conversation, and I get to really focus on being present instead of worrying about the technology or the processes or the admin stuff so I built a system. I mean, I literally sat down and I documented from the absolute beginning to the absolute end and by the way, that definitely evolves, both of those things, but to the best of my abilities at the time, what does that process look like? And I literally went through step by step and screenshotted and screen shared and recorded and documented. And I have like a massive um, Google Doc or a massive PDF of every single thing that needs to be done, to the point where a sixth grader could come in and they could come in and operate my machine. That plus background automations mixed in via technology that I'm also very grateful for, that triggers different things based on the inputs from my team. So it's like it's this really cool mixture of processes that can be done by anybody, an hourly employee, anybody, mixed with technology that aids them and makes it super, super easy. So that's really how I approached it.
Yeah. But it's building a machine. You're right, and you
Oh
have to
yeah.
have each part of those machines talking to each other. And so anyway, so the overall arching goal of my professional life is let's help people flourish, to really kill it in life, to really have a great time. And that also means getting rid of crappy experiences, right? You don't want a crappy romantic partner. You don't want a crappy movie. You don't want a crappy classroom. So we can't get rid of crappy until we measure. And if we're measuring what the brain cares about, then we can move up that kind of value scale and just make life better. So I know that sounds kind of sort of grossly grand, like how, but yeah, I mean, movies are that we have some clients in the movie industry, and like 2 or 3 movies make profit for the entire year. Like most of them lose money. And like I said, I'm old, I guess, but I sit on an airplane now and I look at the 200 movies. I can't find one I even want to watch. I'm just like, another superhero movie, really? I pretty much know how it's going to end. I mean, I'm just telling you, it's not that exciting to me. So how do we get beyond that? And I think as we get more and more things like streaming entertainment, where you have narrow casting, you're really hitting those markets. And so anyway, I just think, I want to be part of that process. So let's just make everything more interesting, more valuable, more impactful. I don't know, you got to measure. So I'm a tool guy, I'm a Martian tool guy, and I'm in the measurement biz. And as you said, this has been 20 years of my life for measuring oxytocin in blood. By the way, we did blood draws. I've done thousands of blood draws to measure oxytocin, just the deep in the trenches science over and over and over and over and over. And the word list, it just takes a long time. Also, I think, I'm going to use one more bad word, Ben, if that's okay.
Yeah,
The
as many as
most
you want.
the most important word in science I've realized recently is the word bullshit. Like the whole goal of science is to get rid of bullshit from our lives. And you do that by running experiments over and over, have other labs run experiments. And so I really try to hold myself. That's the first thing you learn in science is hold yourself to that highest standard. Maybe I'm delusional. Maybe I've just, I don't know, rigged the experiment some way, or I've analyzed the data in some way. So I try to empower everyone around me to use the word bullshit. Like, how do I know it's not bullshit? Well, we've done this 50 different ways and it always worked out. So either I'm the luckiest dude in the world or I got it right. And so I think if for listeners, if you kind of go through in your daily life, but also in business, I think about that's a bullshit thing. That's basically it's critical thinking, right? That just
Right.
sounds like bullshit. So, and the problem I think is when you develop tools like you have, that you get into this, it seems like it's magic. Like because you spent 20 years building this tool, now it works great. You should have talked to me 15 years ago or 10 years ago. It sucked, right? So sometimes when I talk to clients or give public lectures, I'll go through and say, look, it seems like magic, but let me tell you how many stupid mistakes and hundreds of thousands of dollars and hours we wasted doing the wrong things. Because you can't do the wrong things until you can't find the right things until you do the wrong things.
Absolutely. So I want to ask about, um, about the future, and I'm really curious about a couple different things here. One is I want to talk about artificial intelligence. How do you think that is going to, and I realize saying like that artificial intelligence is a very, very broad thing. It's like there are a lot of ambiguity there. But how is that in your vision? How is that going to play into your research, your company, the tools, what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're already using it. So I think it's going to be, um, it's not the hard singularity. It's going to be humans plus. So we do a fair amount of work at developing tools in psychiatry because there's just no really good assays for psychiatric disorders. And so in medicine, anything that involves image recognition, like radiology, dermatology, um, machines are much better at that. Diagnoses, actually, internal medicine machines are now much better because they don't get tired. They don't, they have a much bigger database. Like you go to your doctor and they say, "Oh, Ben, I think you have X," and you think, well, that doctor probably seen 100 times X. This disorder, but we have millions and millions of records of X and all the other contingencies that may affect X. So why am I depending on this doctor's 100 experiences? And yeah, he went to medical school and read a couple of books, but still. Anyway, so I think, for example, in medicine, by using AI, it allows that clinician to spend more time on the human parts of care. So I think of AI putting the care back in healthcare. And I think the same can be true for lots of aspects of our lives. If I begin to outsource ordering groceries or all these other things that burn a lot of my time, I have more time to spend with my family. I have more time to spend things that I find really valuable. I don't think anyone really gets super joy out of grocery shopping. Oh, it could be fun, but I mean, as we begin to automate all these processes, so yeah, will there be a singularity at some point where the machines control us? Maybe, but I think I'm 57, so it's not going to happen in my lifetime. You're younger than me, so maybe you get caught with it. But yeah, I think we're going to see machines plus. I think as think of this as adjunctive technologies. I still think if the AI does the diagnosis for my disorder in the hospital, I still think I want a well-trained doctor to review that and make sure that he or she agrees with that diagnosis, and then can spend more time discussing care options with me, different medications, whatever that is. So I'm kind of enthusiastic about it. But on the other hand, we've established I'm a Martian.
So specifically with your work though, how do you see it? I mean, are you going to start like leveraging it to, or continue leveraging it to like automate some of the data processing that you're doing to better understand all the data that you're collecting, or maybe work with it to, if you're talking about building curriculum, or kind of testing one curriculum versus another one, to automate the testing in the most efficient way? Like, how specifically are you leveraging AI to help with your with your research specifically?
Great. So we certainly improve the algorithms as more data come in, and we're using machine learning to do that. So um, as we get more and more data, then we get very specialized. So now, for example, we have benchmarks for good or bad, so above or below average. It's not actually an average because the data are skewed, but anyway, something like an average. So is this movie good or bad? That's the first thing you kind of want to know. We can begin to specialize that for horror movies, for drama movies, for comedies. So same thing in the K-12 education or training space. I can talk about Ben Gothard's exactly benchmark. So given that we've collected information on you in all kinds of learning settings, we can not only measure whether ex post that was good, but in real time begin to guide you towards highest impact from your brain's perspective. So specifically, as we start moving a lot of learning to online, one worry is that we lose that social component. But AI can then step in and can begin to guide you specifically to say, hey, you know what? Your brain's full. We have all had this experience, right? You're doing it offsite or something. You can't take it anymore. Well, if we knew that right away, say, you know what, your brain's full, take a break, come back in half an hour, and let's come back to this. Or you're rocking and rolling, dude. Just keep it going. Like, attaboy, give you a thumbs up. Like, oh, you are so absorbed this material. So we're building in our technology with a number of online training platforms so that we can actually get this data and really create customized experiences for each individual. And that's an AI problem.
That's fascinating. So it seems like the AI is a supplement to kind of amplify and like amplify your ability to serve people in a very customized way, and just make it to where you can give the individual a very specific personalized experience, because the AI is automating a lot of the pieces, so a human doesn't have to do that.
Exactly right. So the human doesn't do it now, but for my coding brothers, the parameters of these algorithms are hard coded. So the
Mm.
AI begins to open them up, and so they start to evolve. And so again,
Um,
you've got to have enough data online, and we're just about there where we can start implementing the machine learning, just starting to do that. So yeah, so we learn a lot about you, and you learn a lot about yourself. And there's something wild when we do demos of this technology. We're all kind of egotistical about this. Like, it's interesting to see other people's brains work, but man, watching my brain work, that's interesting, right? So,
right.
I put the sensor on you, we crank up the platform, and give you some kind of content, and people are super absorbed. So, give you a concrete example of this. I was with an engineering group at one of the very large cable companies in Denver recently. And so, engineers, these are my people. They speak the language. We can go technical. It's super fun, and they're just spitting out cool ideas. And so I showed them a little short video from HP, our little branding video for HP printers. And you've been engineers. Again, they're Martians like me, so they don't talk a lot. And anyway, we have an algorithm that identifies neurologic super responders, these people whose brains are just over the moon. They love it. They want to help share it. And in that room, both those people had not even spoken for the first, half an hour I was there. And so I identified them. I said, okay, you guys love this HP video. Let's talk about that. So just like that little girl Maria in the math class, all of a sudden you get to draw people out. And I said, let's just look at your data. Wow, look at this. This is really exciting to you. So tell us about that. And so you get this great sense of personalization, and also just super weirdly fun to kind of mind read in a way. Like I'm not telling you what you're thinking, but I can tell you that this thing turns you on. So that's a start.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you ever see a future where, and I think entertainment is probably the easiest application of this, but somebody's watching, a movie or a show or something, they're watching some content, and as they're going through like the initial piece of that content, there are a couple different themes or a couple different formats baked into that original piece of content. And so as they're going through the first 5 or 10 minutes, you can understand like, okay, this specific piece of that original content, this lights them up the most. Okay, now we line up the next one to be most like the next best guess of, based on what they just saw. Almost like a choose your own adventure, but the AI
Right.
chooses it for you based on what you just saw and what you're responding to the most.
Brilliant. And yeah, exactly right. So we're certainly thinking about that. We're not there yet. And I think once we move into the VR world, we do have a choose your own adventure. Once you've got this headset on, I can just pick up the physiologic data from you, apply our algorithms, and even more simply, things like giving you a chance in the non-entertainment world to figure out what you like. So here's an imagined future, which is your girlfriend or wife gets you tickets to the opera, and you're thinking, oh man, I'm not an opera guy, right? But you're going to go, and then you have your wearable on, and you finish the opera, and your phone goes, hey, what was that experience? Because that was pretty awesome, and you click on opera, and so it says, you might want to go to that opera again. Now, again, I wasn't there, the machine wasn't there. I don't know. Maybe your girlfriend wore a cute dress and high heels and you were looking at her the whole time. I don't know. But it says you might want to think about doing the opera again. And then say you go again and you also get a great experience, 2 for 2. I can start pushing you information about other things. People like the opera also like the symphony. Here's 50% off to try out the symphony. So I can actually help you curate your entire life, right? So that you really understand what you like and what you don't like, which is going to evolve over time too. So that's the sense in which I want to really use this technology to help people flourish in the great sense. Let's avoid the crappy experiences and let's focus on the stuff that really gives us great satisfaction and happiness. And we just don't know that. here's a second, if I can, second example of that, which is if we have this, so we're a B2B company, so we're not doing any B2C. So I'm imagining these B2C applications. You and your wife opt in to share each other's data. So now when you get home, you've got to, and your spouse is cranky. We all do this, right? We'll go, oh, that person. Oh man. You don't say that because you have enough self-control, but we think like, oh, I had a hard day and now I'm going to put up with this. But what if you got a message on the way home on your device saying, hey, your husband or wife is having a really tough day today, and pick up some flowers, take him or her to dinner, whatever that is. Imagine how much better your life would be, because you don't have to use your little tired, tiny brain to figure out that your spouse is having a bad day. They're not mad at you, they're just having a bad day. And that means that we're cranky, right? So I think all these kind of prosthetics, and we're getting back to AI now, once we have these prosthetics and we're actually getting insight into our own preferences, into other people's behavior, we stop, I think, treating people, we stop doing that knee-jerk reaction, and we start building compassion for the wide variation in human behavior in ourselves and other people. And let me tell you, just to cap that off, having now spent 20 years measuring people's brain activity and they're measuring their behavior, again, from psychopaths to psychiatric patients to healthy adults, I'm completely tolerant to all kinds of weird behavior. Like, it just does not bother me, because when you see that brain data and you go, oh, this person who I thought was weird, their brain is processing this information completely differently. And if I can characterize why that is, they're tired, they're hungry, they have a weird childhood, whatever those things are, if I can capture that in the brain, then it's much harder to dismiss people and go, he's a bad person or she's a bad person, and say, oh, here's a person having a super bad day, right? What should I do about that? I could try to help them, actually. Have some compassion.
That's huge. So I want to talk about this idea of helping people flourish. And I'm curious because, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who is very, very, very interested in like personal development and improving myself, sometimes I have to do things that, while right now it may not be the most fun thing, I know that later on it's going to be way worth it. And so, like, I guess my question is, if we're optimizing for happiness and satisfaction, then could that not be like how do you balance short-term happiness and satisfaction with long-term happiness and satisfaction? Because like that's a way different ballgame, and something that makes you happy now could make you really unhappy later, and vice versa.
It's such a deep question. I don't think I have a great answer for that, but I'll give you the data answer. It's a fundamentally important question. So, right, why did I go to the gym this morning at 7 a.m. as opposed to eating chocolate cake? I like going to the gym, but yeah. So how do we balance the pain in order to get greater satisfaction? So again, I think the key word here is satisfaction and not happiness. So I'm doing a lecture in Brazil in about 2 weeks, 3-hour lecture on the neuroscience of happiness and how to hack happiness to be happier. So I have thought about a lot about this. But think of the Stoics, right? They talked about the really importance of pain so that you gain mastery over yourself and over the situation you're in. So from a data perspective, what we see in the brain is this kind of sine wave pattern, where when I'm deeply immersed in experience, when I'm really valuing the experience highly, it's metabolically costly, and I have to have a kind of a downtime. So I think the suffering, the difficulty that we have to do, things we don't want to do that create higher value, and we have to look at that over a long enough time scale. It's not just the right now. If in this lecture, I'm going to say, if you want to maximize your acute happiness right now, go take methamphetamine or cocaine or something, right? Now, there's lots of downsides to that. Eventually, it's going to kill you, but you'll be super, super happy, right? So I've heard. I don't know personally, but from all the reports. So versus, again, the person who went to the gym, was eating healthy, they're looking at that longer time span. So that's what I would call flourishing or life satisfaction, not this acute happiness. And lastly, our brains are surprisingly blunt in terms of evaluating good and bad. Mm-hmm. And you can't really value good or even super good unless you have something to compare it to the bad. So I do think that we're just designed to at least have some suffering, some pain, some difficulty, right? We all have that. And so it makes the high points higher, at least more easily identified, perhaps. So yeah, I haven't answered your question very well, Ben. I don't think there's a good answer to it. I certainly don't know it, right? So why suffer for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years in college and graduate school to reach this higher on the hope, right, that you're going to get a good job, have a better career. I don't know how people do it. I was just telling my kids. So I've got 12 years post high school education, and I was looking back and go, man, wow, what was I thinking? Like, I don't think I would start that again. It was too hard. The PhD is so hard to do, and I just suffered a ton. I lost weight. I didn't have money to eat. I was, the whole thing was super hard. Now it opened up all these opportunities for me, which are beautiful. But yeah, how do we make that trade-off? Maybe it's the naivete of youth. I don't know.
Well, I certainly don't know. So I appreciate you sharing your opinion on it.
Yeah.
But, I do think that with some sort of system or it seems like once we get to the point where AI can be integrating really, really important research and methodology that we're talking about, specifically with your research, we can use that to optimize ourselves. And so it would seem like we might be able to kind of program in on the front end, like, hey, I want to live this kind of life. I want to maintain a certain level of health, a certain level of wealth, a certain level of so on and so forth, all the disciplines of life. And then it could almost seem like based on that input, the algorithm can then help us to move towards the activities or the behaviors or the habits that can help us accomplish those things that we're trying to go for.
Like an AI life coach.
Yeah,
But then what
exactly.
happens? You get hit by the bus tomorrow. It's unforecastable, right? And you think, I've been suffering all this time, and then something happens. So I wonder if it. I'm sort of pro neuroscience, of course. So I think the neuroscience of storytelling and movies and spirituality, all these things, I think it enhances our experience. I don't think it takes away from that.
Agreed.
But I think the difficulty, until I know a lot about you personally, if I'm using averages, then I'm pushing back. So we actually have a research program in my academic lab on what we call neural diversity. So in the same situation, people do different things, and you over time in the same situation will do different things because you're different. Your experiences are different. Again, you're tired or hungry, whatever. So let's try to actually capture those differences. So we're measuring neurologic activity multiple ways simultaneously, and we'll follow people over time and figure out why people are weird, which is, I guess, my underlying issue. So we need that kind of data in the AI world to say, okay, today Ben's physiology is very different, so I might want to guide him this way. Oh, except I understand that he loves to drink on Fridays and Saturdays. He's going to be wiped out. I'm making all this up now, right? So I can't overweight the Saturday data stream, and that I think requires a very deep level of technology. But it's potentially it's doable. Do you think it takes away from the spontaneity of life, though?
I don't know. I think it could. I think it could if there is no ability to override and say, you know what, I'm just not feeling that. I want to do something else.
Yeah.
Which of course could throw off the whole thing, and it would then need to recalibrate, and that could, so
Right.
I don't know, but I think it's interesting, and it could be really helpful because I know a lot of people that I talk to, and I'm very lucky to be able to talk to a lot of people. If they're trying to accomplish something, but they just have some vice or some behavior or habit that's just holding them back. Like, for example, they like to wake up in the morning and scroll on social media, but then they know that that's not helping them, but for whatever reason they still choose to do it. At least having that reminder of like your AI pal, Jumbotron, just wants to let you know this is probably not going to help you get to goals XYZ based on reasons ABC. At least that could be helpful, and it could at least give another touch point of like gently nudging you in the right direction. So
We use wearables, and we haven't activated this, but we could sort of just vibrate your wearable and say, hey, this ain't good for you. You can still
exactly.
do it, but at least we're going to give you a reminder and help sort of train yourself. And there's something beautiful about having objective data. So I'll give you a really short story. I was in Japan recently filming a TV show for the national broadcaster NHK TV, and the show is called The Divorce Epidemic. So apparently there's a large number of middle-aged Japanese women who are divorcing their husbands for the reasons that you can imagine. They're never home, they're not affectionate, they don't help around the house, and they live frickin' forever. And so the woman's thinking like, I can't do 40 more years with this dude, you know, and the kids are teenagers or whatever. And so anyway, so we're in this couple's house, and this woman has said to the national broadcaster, to the camera, for the past 2 years, I've been, thinking about divorcing my husband. So you are down the trail on the divorce path.
Right.
Anyway, so we measured immersion. We gave them experiences to do to raise immersion. And then at the end of that day, we showed the women the data. It's like, here's their baseline, experience 1, experience 2, it's getting higher. And she started crying. And she said, I never knew my husband really cared about me. And I'm like, wow. Right. So I think that's the power of getting data or measuring what matters, is that you get an insight. We all get stuck in this sort of psychological mode where like, my husband's an ass, I don't want to be around him. I'm like, actually, he really cares about you. And maybe he doesn't express it. And we should talk about that a little bit. But no, it's not like he's indifferent to you. So I think that was interesting, right? And somehow having that data moves the out of the feeling state and into the fact state, maybe.
Yeah, it's almost like it takes us out of our own little world that we kind of get wrapped up in the stories we tell ourselves, to be like, well, hey, we might be under this impression that we've put ourselves under, but like that's not the reality of what's happening. I think that's really powerful. So I want to be very respectful of your time. And I know we've been going on for a while, and I'm deeply appreciative of the time that you have shared this far. I do have a few more quick questions
Sure.
for you. I want to kind of play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay.
The technology and the tools that you've built and you're building are very, very powerful. And for people who use it in the right way, it's a very, very good thing. Do you ever worry about this methodology, these tools, this research, this technology going into the hands of people who are not going to use it for good? And like, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it is a concern. So I think we address it in a couple ways. One is always have an opt-in. No one's forced to use this technology. If you think it's going to help you, awesome. If you prefer not to, don't do it. Or privacy issues. So our platform doesn't collect any personal data. That it'll push to your phone. So again, if I worked hard enough, I could connect your phone to you and all that. But generally, people are super interested in what their brains are doing. So we generally don't see people who go, nah, don't want to do it. But if they do, that's fine. I think we should be open to that too.
Well, I'm thinking more like, if and this is an extreme example, but just hypothetically, because I think it is possible. Let's say some sort of governmental agency gets it and it wants to apply it and use it in a way to nudge their people into something that is just not good for humanity. And obviously there's a lot of ambiguity there, but I think I think you get what I'm going at.
Yeah, as I obviously am very concerned about that. So when we were funded by the U.S. military, we were required every 6 months to attend a session on the ethics of measuring people's brain activity and turning that into predictive models. And so, as I said, we can predict what you'll do before you do it with the 80% plus accuracy. So I could manipulate that outcome, knowing your brain activity.
Right.
The question is, how consistent is that? Now we're back to the AI question. Is it been 2 weeks ago? Is it been today? Is it been 2 weeks from the future? I don't know how consistent these signals are. We just don't have enough data to say that. So I think for now, it's not a big concern, but I think you're right. 5 to 10 years from now, we should really be concerned about that. And maybe there's, kind of a virtual private network. Maybe that data just lives with me and doesn't go to the cloud, or doesn't. Maybe there's a way to sort of fence it so it actually doesn't leak out. I think that's above my pay grade, but I think we should be concerned as a society about all of this. How about health information, right? Super. I mean, it's all going to be on your phone or in a chip in your hand or whatever, which is great if you get pulled into the ER and you're unconscious, but sort of not so great maybe if you're the government or insurance company. So yeah, that's a deep question again.
Well, I appreciate you humoring me there with my deep questions. Got two more for you, then we'll wrap
Yes,
it
sir.
on up. It seems like you've been doing a lot of incredible research and a lot of work in a lot of different fields. You created your own field, which I'm very glad that you did, and I'm very grateful for the work that you have done. At this point in your life, what questions do you still have about yourself?
Wow. Yeah, I think it's a deep, I'm 57, so I've been on the planet a while. I really think it's a question of where I'm going next. So my kids are in the process of moving out of the house. Um, uh, I never had hobbies till recently, so now I have some hobbies, which is a weird thing for me. Um, yeah, I think it's, what do I do for the next 30 years? And I think that's a deep issue. So because I'm a Martian, I like to continue to build tools and write code, and that's sort of weirdly fun for me. Um, but what are the factors that are going to give me great satisfaction with my life? And I don't know. I don't know what those are. I never. Once your kids are moving out of the house, you have a lot of, huge chunks of time that you didn't have before, and I don't want to fill it watching movies all the time. So I don't have any suggestions. Do you have any insights? What do people do?
Well, I really love being in nature. That's infinitely rewarding, and I also love playing music. So that's also very brings me a lot of joy.
Good. I got the nature thing covered. I got a dog, and then I've been out hiking, and crazy stuff happens when you're like away from the city, right? All kinds of weird. So that's been fun. Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
actually like uncertainty a lot. So my personality type, I like, you probably do too from what you do. So I actually like not knowing what's going to happen to me. So I like taking on sort of adventures in which crazy things go down, and then you just got to, deal with it. So um, anyway, it sounds
How about
weird. There's a pathology there probably.
well, I have it too, for sure.
Okay, good. We'll hang out. Where are you?
Yeah.
You're in New Orleans, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
New
Okay.
Orleans, Louisiana.
Next time I come down, we'll go do something crazy.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
It'll be fun. So last question for you.
Yeah.
Um, what question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
Gosh, you're a deep thinker, man. Um, I think the why question is really weird or interesting. Um, I think part of the pathology of working too much is being super absorbed in some things that I find really interesting. And I'm lucky to have a job that lets me explore those by and large, which is great. But there is an underlying, you know, doing too much work, or maybe having a need to have an impact on the world, or think you're having an impact on the world. Um, that there's something weird about that. I think people who are super driven um, have a little underlying. They have some issues underlying it. So I had a friend recently, actually was at TED last year, and a friend of mine at TED said, "Have you been successful because you're super smart, or because you have high energy?" I said, "Actually, because I have high energy. I don't have to sleep that much. I just love getting my feet and stuff. I'm okay smart, but most of it's just super excited about. I'm high on life, man." So I think that, the origin issue, I think you kind of touched on it, but I glossed over that. I have some weird pathology that my siblings don't have, that really my parents didn't have. And I see in the people on my team, they're all outliers, right? I have a guy on my team whose father stopped going to school in 8th grade. This guy has a PhD. How does that happen? Right? That's pretty
Mhm.
amazing to me. So he's got the same pathology I have. And um, I don't think it's a terrible pathology to have, but I do think sometimes the people around us suffer. I think my wife suffers a bit because of this. I'm just absorbed in what I'm doing, and I'm blocked out the rest of the world. And for me, that's a great thing, but for her, probably it's not so nice.
Well, Dr. Paul, I want to thank you very, very much for coming on the show today and sharing this time with me. It's been very meaningful and very special. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Ben. I had no idea we're going to get to these really deep issues that felt like we did a little therapy here. So great. And I will see you in New Orleans. Okay.
Absolutely. And to everybody who's watching and listening, I want to thank y'all, and I will see everybody on the next episode.